Yo, what's going on, guys? This is your boy Anvil Head here, and I'm back with Sarah for the sticky note taker. We haven't done this in a while, but we are here, and we're gonna be going over some typing stuff. So we're gonna go over the best offensive type. But before we get into it, how you doing, Sarah?
Yeah, pretty good today. Pretty good. I'm not gonna get into it, but pretty good. I
Nice, nice.
love Thursdays. It's a Thursday, guys. Best day of the
Yep,
week.
yep.
Underrated
It's
day.
6-9. It's 6-9. You already know it's good.
Oh wow. Oh my god. I didn't know it was that nice. Thank you
Mhm.
for telling me that. Unfortunately for folks that are not in America, it will be 9-6. But
True, true.
you guys gotta wait a bit more. But
Yep.
um, yeah. Let's just get into it. So
All right.
what's interesting about this one is I think a lot of times Anvil and I are pretty aligned on our opinions, but I think we got some pretty different ideas of what the best offensive types are, and I think it'll be interesting to hear our different rationales. I actually don't know why Amble picked his picks, and he doesn't know why I picked my picks, so
Mhm.
it'll be a surprise for everybody. So
Yep,
let me just
yep.
get my laser pointer because we're in college. So
Oh yes.
I guess I'll do mine first. So oh wow,
Sounds good.
this looks more pixelated than I remember, but that's okay. Okay, so um, for me, I have two S tier picks for offensive types, best offensive types. I have Rock, which I think is the best, followed closely by Ice. Now, for me, Rock is an easy one because Stealth Rocks are like the most important move in the game, and Rock in general is a really great typing. Like it's only resisted by like two things: Steel and Fighting. I think that's it, right? Yeah, just Steel and Fighting.
Ye-
And yeah, it hits so many things neutrally or super effectively. I think people like maybe overlook Rock because they don't think of Stealth Rock as being Rock type, or they think of like most Rock types, which are kind of underwhelming, especially in ORAS. Like this is before like your Nihiligo. Actually, I haven't heard it pronounced in a while for how it sounds. Nihiligo, we're gonna say, and your stack attackas and things like that. But as a pure offensive type, as a coverage, Rock is just so good. Um, yeah, I mean, really, I don't know what else I need to say more than Stealth Rocks.
yeah.
It's called Stealth Rocks, guys. Not Stealth Bug, not Stealth Fighting. It's Stealth Rocks. Um, yeah, it's just really good, and the two resistances are easy to patch up. So you do
Mhm.
fighting, ground, right, and you basically hit like everything neutrally after that.
That is true, yeah.
The only argument I think, or people maybe that don't like rock, is that Stone Edge misses sometimes, but it's still like 80%, which is better than Focus Blast.
True, true. That
You
is a
know,
good point.
yeah, which I think like that is pretty solid. Although it doesn't hit as hard either, but it does have a high crit chance, which
True, true.
it definitely does come up. You never feel secure setting up on a Stone Edge um, choice lock mon. And
Hmm.
then Ice I have as the other S tier. So Ice, really good. I mean, I think of Bolt Beam coverage, and in my opinion, it's mostly the beam there that's pulling the work. But Ice
Hmm.
also hits a lot of things, and I think just like Rock, where the Pokemon itself that are Ice types tend to be overlooked because, well, in the case of Ice types, they're very frail. They got awful defensive typing, worse than Rock. I think easily the worst. I think there's very few people that would argue that Ice isn't the worst defensive type. But just as bad as it is defensively, it's ridiculous offensively. I mean, I think of it like this: Weavile, right? One of the few fast and really good ice types in general. That ice stab mixed with like any solid coverage option or secondary stab is just incredible. You think of Cloyster. I mean, it's kind of like a I guess as like a low ladder pick Cloyster, but in the recent SPL, there were a couple of players that they were using it to pretty good effect. on their teams. So it's not a joke.
True, true.
Yeah, if they gave ice types a little more to work with, which I think they have in recent years, like with Kyurem, for instance.
Oh yeah, and the Arctozolt and the
Oh yeah,
other
results.
like hail and stuff and shit.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. Oh, Roarveil is something else. That's a little silly, but yeah, I think give ice types like something to actually work with, like not like a slow, frail thing,
Mhm.
and they'll put in work. But
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But offensively, this hits a lot of things besides steel again, fire. Um, and that's it. Oh, well, and water. Unless you're freeze dry,
True, true.
then it's just two types. Which again, fire and steel. Run ground. Look at that. Bolt beam,
Yeah.
bolt ground, even better. And that reflects in my picks. Okay, so those are the S tiers. A tier, I have water just ahead of fire. So water is probably like one of the best types as well overall, offensively and defensively. Offensively, it's great neutrally, hits a lot of stuff, and stuff it doesn't hit for the most part. You pair it with ice or another coverage option, and you hit everything pretty much neutrally. Another great boon for water types is the rain. So having a weather that can support it too, and it's not so much in ORAS. You don't see rain that much because it's not that good. But basically every other format, like rain, really makes water even more threatening. And then you got attacks like Scald, for instance, which are so easily spammable that it just deserves to be really high. I don't know what else to say. Like the things I resisted are grass, other water types, and dragon. But once again, you pair with ice, then you hit the other two, the grass and the dragon. So and almost every water type gets ice coverage. So water types very rarely have issues when it comes to coverage. So that's another thing going for them in their favor. So yeah, so solid defensive typing. So that they can often take like uh, it's hard to revenge kill them. If you think of like Manaphy, right? But even, not even just Manaphy, a lot of priority moves like Aqua Jet, Bullet Punch. They resist. So yeah, that was really good. Fire. So suns, I think, always pale in comparison to water. I mean, terrain. But
Mm.
in ORAS, with the introduction of fairy, it suddenly had some nice defensive buff, being able to resist the new fairy type. It also hit it neutrally. And really, fire hits a lot of things neutrally too. I think for a while, fire type was not too far off from like rock and ice, in that they were really good offensively, but the Pokemon that had them were just so bad defensively, or they didn't have like any niche, or they were exploited by the metagames they're in. But fire's crept up a little bit since then. So fire, once again, lots of neutral coverage, lots of lots of really high base power moves. You think of like Flare Blitz, which besides the recoil doesn't miss really. You think of a V create, Victinis and stuff. You think of a
Mm.
overheat, you know that's really strong and surprising. Eruption, which I could say the same thing for water spout for water, but eruption, there's not really there's a lot of different fire moves out there that a lot of mons get, or certain mons get, that also put them over the top. And though I wouldn't say sun, pure sun is a thing in ORAS either compared to rain. At least the Sunsetter, Charizard Y, is really good. I'd say it's a really solid mega. It's really hard. You get the solar beam, so you have the grass coverage, so you hit everything there. So um, so far my picks are the types hit a lot of things neutrally, and their resists are easy to patch up generally, and fire is no different. So I think it's a really good type. Okay, now I have fairy. So fairy, I think most people would argue is either the best or second best type. overall, but I think offensively it's really good. It is really good. It has Moonblast, which is one of the few spammable, you know, no drawback special attacks. 95 base power when everything else got dropped to 90. That's 30% chance to drop a attack. Really good. Super spammable. Hits a lot of things. Once again, the things it doesn't hit: poison, steel, fire. Which, again, pair with ground. Ground's really good. Um, but the issue I have with fairy is, at least in ORAS, is that most of there are really any strong fairies that much. Like Mega Gardevoir, Azumarill, but they tend to be pretty frail. Otherwise, not Clefable, but the other ones, or they can be exploited in some way. Um, when I'm just that, I just feel like fairy is like so good also that people prep for it. So as good as it is, like you just have steel types, and that kind of you know neuters them a bit, most of them. And yeah, I don't know. I think fairy is really good. I think it's really good, but a lot of them actually don't get ground coverage, which is funny. Like Clefable doesn't get ground, Gardevoir doesn't get ground. The only one I think that gets ground is Mega Diancie, and and that's why it's like one of the best. So I'm also considering a little bit like the context of these moves too, like yeah. So because fairies is really good on paper, but because it's also not used as much. I mean, not many things get fairy typing in general. I mean, some things get dazzling gleam, but most things that aren't fairy do not get like Moonblast or Play Rough. Hell, most there aren't even many physical fairies. That's the other thing. It's very skewed towards special. I think physical fairies like solid, but like special is really where it's at. Whereas I think the other types so far, like they're good on both sides. But Play Rough is definitely not as good as Moonblast since it can miss. So it's a little more ordinary physically.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, just like little things like that, and it can deal with the best type, like most of the other ones can that we said so far, at least an A. So for that reason, it's an A. But I think I like water and fire a little better.
Hmm.
Okay, ground. So ground, I was mentioning it for the other ones. Ground is like the best neutral coverage. Period. Earthquake, since it's been a staple move since Gen 1. 100 base power. No chance to miss unless it's like a flying type, of course. But I don't count that as missing. So besides like the flying types, zero drawback. And most things that get ground moves also get rock moves. So very easy to patch up. In my opinion, rock and ground is like probably the best, or at least one of the best, if not the best, dual coverage combos in the game.
Hmm.
And yeah, really, it's mostly earthquake. Like you don't really need much else. Like earthquake is just really good.
Yeah.
Um, like I said, the flying is a drawback, but that's what rocks are for. That's what rocks are for. On the special side, like Earth Power, for instance, also really good. There's not as much distribution compared to Earthquake, but it's still really potent. And regular Earthquake is, I'll say regular Earthquake is so good. Some things that even have like a little bit of attack will run it as coverage. Like I think of maybe sometimes Charizard Y, or God, something else. It feels like another obvious one I'm forgetting. Oh, Latios, Mega Latios, regular Latios. You might sometimes see that. It just really great coverage. Like ground is great. Okay, last pick for A, and then I'll start going a little faster. Flying. So flying, it doesn't have any immunities, and the stabs are really strong. You got your Brave Birds, acrobatics, if you use the item, or you have no item. Um, Hurricane, so it'll miss a lot, but still like pretty scary. And then with the confusion chance, And then Air Slash, one of my favorites. Relatively steady, nice flinch chance. So those attacks and maybe a few others, some niche ones, very spammable. High base power. Either they don't miss, or if they do miss, they have a really nice secondary effect, or they hit really hard at least. So yeah, I think flying is really good. It's not affected by weather or anything. The only things it doesn't like are electric, rock, and steel, which all of them are checked by ground again. Ground is so good, guys. I freaking love ground. Honestly, I might put ground higher next time if I were to use again. Really like ground, even with that drawback. But yeah. So flying, very powerful. It's why Talonflame is so good. It's that flying stab and the priority and the high base power moves. I'm trying to think of anything else. Yep, that's about it. I guess it's similar to ice and fire, and that, or maybe even rock too. That for a while the defensive typing was so bad, it kind of masked how good the offensive typing was. And also, there aren't that many mons that aren't flying that get flying coverage, or that's worthwhile flying coverage. You know, so you can say it holds it back, but I think that's also Game Freak acknowledging like how strong it could be if they gave it proper distribution or less, what do you call it, less costly moves, I guess. Okay, B tier. So I got Dark. So I love Dark Spam. I think it's really strong, as even with fairies existing, but at the same time, um, pretty much everything else it's like strong against, besides fairy and fighting. But no, it's mainly the fairy weakness or a fairy resist that holds it back a little bit for me. But the moves, Dark Pulse, Knockoff. Oh my god, Knockoff, especially, are so spammable. But yeah, there's a lot of great moves for Dark. I feel like Dark has like a lot of like interesting tactics to it. Like losing an item with Knockoff, foul play, punishment. Sucker punch. So it's got I would say it's more like interesting than like just strictly powerful. But yeah, so it's still really good. Knockoff's one of the most spammable moves. So for that, it's at the high end of B tier for me. Fighting. So I think maybe this is where I deviate with some people. I think fighting's okay. I think it's pretty good, but not being able to hit fairy super effectively, um, ghost immunity, um, psychic, flying, a poison. It's got quite a few resists that are also good defensive types. Now it can run coverage for some of those, but not all of them at once. And I feel like I don't know. I feel like it's almost better defensively in some ways nowadays. I mean, Keldio's has been great in the past, but yeah, I don't know. I'm just not that super impressed by fighting typically, unless it's like I'm on like a close combat. I don't know, but even then, it's very easy to switch into typically. Besides like mid cham high jump kick, I think that, and Lopunny to a slightly lesser extent. So it's really good in certain situations, but it's also like high cost. I'm sorry, high risk high reward type of thing for me. So it's yeah, so it's a little volatile. So that's why it's B. Electric. Electric will be amazing if ground didn't exist. But because ground exists and it's basically on every team, it makes electric a lot worse. And the fact that a lot of electric types tend to have pretty bad coverage options. They usually have to rely on HP ice to deal with the grounds, and that's a big You know, I think that's a big issue for it. Now, for ground, to me, it's less of an issue with the flying, for instance, because at least the flying types will probably take rocks. And flying is weak to rocks, so even if they come in, they'll either have to roost or they'll have to come back out. So they're either getting chipped or losing momentum. With electric, ground types resist the rocks, and they can punish it right back. So to me, it's a little worse interaction than with the ground and the flying type. So for that, it's strictly B tier for me, and also because the types it's super effective against flying, water. I think that's it, right? Just flying and water.
Mhm.
Those are solid, but that's really it. And then the downside, I think, is really really great. So it's middle of the road for me. Ghost. So Ghost it's about the same as a Dark, honestly, except it doesn't hit Dark super effectively, which is just like Ghost, just like Dark, it doesn't hit Dark super effectively itself. Although I guess it's hits the fighting types that Dark is resisted by, and the fairies. Actually, Ghost is pretty good. Yeah, I should put this higher. But um, no, no, I remember why. So for Ghost, Ghost coverage is kind of bad on most things. You'll simply rather run like a dark coverage move, like knockoff, or something else instead of Ghost. Because Shadow Ball is okay; it's not that amazing, for instance, and there aren't really any great physical Ghost options besides like Phantom Force, which is a two-turn move, so those are usually aren't great. Though it does break protect, so it's a little better than average. So for me, the distribution is pretty awful. The users of Ghost or the Ghost types themselves tend to be scared out. So in a way, the lack of defense is making the offense worse. So the offense can't get on the field because the defense is that bad. So for me, at least in ORAS, Ghost is middle of the pack. Psychic. So Psychic has a lot of neutral coverage, has a lot of things, but dark types are really good, and they just completely, stonewall them unless you predict like a focus blast, and even then you gotta hit it, which you don't always hit it, or they just revenge kill you if you do get a kill. So that's the end of that. Um, for me, I think Psychic may be a little better defensively, slightly. I don't know. Psychic's weird. So because of that weirdness, it's in B. And finally, we have Dragon. So Dragon definitely took a hit with the advent of fairy types, because before that, it basically hit everything besides steel. But with fairies being very common and good, and just outright countering them, it makes Dragon a bit worse. Although I will say, Dragon moves tend to have a high base power, so kind of like fire moves we mentioned earlier, like Draco Meteor, Outrage. You really don't want like an Outrage that much nowadays. But Draco Meteor, you know, so there's a bunch of like special ones that like a lot of Ubers have. But Draco Meteor has decent enough coverage, so or distribution. So say like Draco's hits pretty hard. A lot of dragons have pretty great stats all around. So I'll add that into consideration. But yeah, it's just still a solid. Yeah, still a great type. Solid offensive type too. Although once again, you probably won't want to see it as a coverage option on most things, unless it's like really niche. So yeah, C tier. Now we're getting to like just their average. Like they're not amazing, they're not awful. So I have Steel first. So really, Steel is mostly here just because of fairies. So Steel is the easiest way to deal with fairies, because Steel types are better than poison types in ORAS especially. So because of that, it's easier to find like a Steel answer to fairy than a poison answer, typically, but not always. Yeah, so being able to deal with the other best type is great. But besides that, it's only good against, or should I say, super effective against rock and ice, which everything else is. So big deal. I think that's it, right? Yeah. Everything else,
Yeah.
yeah. So it's really just a fairy thing, and it's resisted by water and fire, opposing steel, and fighting. No, not fighting. Electric. I think electric resisted too, right?
Yep.
Yeah. I had to think about it. So yeah, those are like some common types. So decent neutral coverage. Great that it's super effective against fairy, but the super effectiveness in general though is pretty lackluster. So because of that, it's in C. Grass type. So grass, I think, is underrated, especially in ORAS. This is before grassy surge and some scary grass types like Bulu and Kartana appeared in Sun and Moon. So really, you mostly just have Superior, and maybe me sometimes using Chestnut or Breloom. That's mostly it. But many teams don't prep for grass, so if you think it should be higher, I think that'll be why. It's the surprise factor. But yeah, I mean, it's good against water, which is pretty important. Um, it's good against ground, which is also really nice. That's about it. And there's quite a few resists. Fairy. I'm sorry, not fairy. Poison, fire, flying, steel. You know, some of those are pretty common, or it may not have an answer to any of those. So because of that, it's still in C, but I think it's underrated. Bug, U-turn exists. Sadly, it's more for the utility than being a bug type. Um, yeah, I don't know. I feel like even the good bug types, besides like Heracross, their best attacks aren't the bug stab. Like Volcarona uses his fire coverage, or it's a fire stab more. Pinsir, it's aerialate. It's really just a flying type with the bug weakness. The bad bug weaknesses. Um, yeah, so I feel like bug types are pretty solid nowadays, especially compared to where they used to be. It's more so other things that got going for them than their typing being that good to begin with. So for that reason, that's in C. And then lastly in C, we got Poison, my favorite type. Poison's great. I think more defensively than offensively. Like Steel, it attacks. Yeah, it's super effective against fairies, but sadly not much else. Like hits grass. I think that's it. So it's really underwhelming offensively. Although there are good offensive poison types. Usually you have like another stab for coverage to make up for that. But yeah, the being super effective against fairies isn't really enough in my opinion. And even so, there aren't that many of them to make it worthwhile. Sometimes you run poison coverage though. I will say, like Sludge Bomb or Sludge Wave on stuff sometimes, but yeah, typically you're not like hoping a new starter is going to be poison type for the coverage. So we'll just say it like that. And then finally, in my opinion, the worst offensive type is normal. So normal, I mean, it's probably got like the best neutral coverage, I guess, but it doesn't hit anything super effectively, and it's either um, can't touch ghost or it's resisted by rock and steel. Um, yeah, I mean, very rarely again will you see neutral or I'm saying normal type as a coverage option. Unless someone has really bad like moves, then they'll do that maybe. Like I think Slurpuff maybe sometimes runs return or something. Um, yeah, I mean there's Pokemon like Diggersby or Lopunny, but Diggersby has like huge power and it's stab, and Lopunny has Scrappy, which gives it like even more neutral coverage, and then you combine it with its other stab of fighting. It makes it better. But on its own, normal, not that great offensively. Like it's not awful, but it's just not great. It has like less going for it, I think, than everything else, which at least has something super effective that it can hit. And that's my list.
Nice, nice.
Yeah, sorry, I talked a lot. I talked a long time.
No, no, it's all good. You
Okay.
gave good explanations as to why you thought certain picks were higher or lower, which I can respect.
Yeah. Okay, Anvil. I
And
guess you can go through yours, and then if you want to talk at the end together, see if we
yeah,
change
yeah,
our minds or anything. I guess I don't know.
yeah, that sounds good. Because I think after listening to a couple of your picks, I definitely want to change some of mine.
Well, don't do it yet.
Uh,
We'll
oh
go through
yeah,
what you
yeah,
got.
yeah,
You can tell us
yeah.
your
Yep,
tell
yep,
me your
yep.
rationale. Okay, so
Yep.
now
So
Annabelle's turn.
yep. So in S tier, don't mind that. That was supposed to be rock type. So I got my like symbols messed up. So I
Oh,
also
okay.
have rock and ice in S tier. Uh, my reasoning is the same as Sarah, so I won't go too much into that. But I think a notable change that you guys can notice is I have dark and ghost up here too. And my main reason for dark being up here is the fact that, like Sarah said, knockoff is a very spammable move, and dark type has very few resists. So there's other dark types, there's fighting types, and then there's fairy types. Um, and then when you click knockoff, the worst thing that can happen is that you take your opponent's item. So it really is like a no drawback move, and after they buffed it in Gen 6, it has been really solid. Um, and similar to what Sarah said before, I think the fact that so many of the dark type moves have like these tricky drop, like tricky after effects, that it becomes really dangerous to face up against. Say for example, you're facing Hydreigon, right? Dark is very spammable, right? So you could just flinch down a Pokemon that's slower than you and just beat it that way with the Specs Dark Pulse. I also want to say that SD Sucker Punch, like on Bisharp, is one of the scariest things to go up against. And the fact that it has access to an extremely strong like priority move at base 70 is very solid, especially for a type that has very few resists. Um, and then there's also like other niche options too, like beat up, which I've seen Amir use that, and it can honestly like 6-0 certain teams just by clicking beat up Weavile. Um, but yeah, I'd say the biggest reason for me putting it up high is because of stuff like knockoff and other like scary niche options like um or I wouldn't say niche because they're actually used more, but Dark Pulse, Sucker Punch, Beat Up, even like stuff like Crunch. If you spam Crunch and you get this Pedef drop, that is also pretty scary to go up against. Um, but yeah, I think that yeah, that's my reasoning for why it's so high up here. And then next up I have Ghost. So my main reasoning for Ghost is that number one, not many people prep for it. So oftentimes people don't have a resist to Ghost on their team, and I think the most offensive like Ghost types in the tier, which in my opinion are like Gengar, Chandelure, uh, Hoopa, they can absolutely maul through teams with their Ghost stabs, and I think Shadow Ball is like one of the most devastatingly spammable moves, not just for ghost types, but it can benefit like other special attackers too. So like I can give you guys an example of a calc. So if Mega Zam Shadow Balls a Scissor, which can usually it live a Focus Blast. If it Shadow Balls a Scissor and it gets a Spadef drop, then Focus Blast can just KO it on the following turn. So that's one of the reasons why Shadow Ball is just kind of scary because that yeah, I think it's like 10%, but it can be high. Like it looks higher than it seems. Um, and yeah, although Sarah I think had a good point where like distribution is kind of low. There's not very good. There's not even a good physical ghost, but special ghosts, don't sleep on them because they are oftentimes extremely hard to switch into, and they do have tricks up their sleeves as well to beat monsters that could like pursue it. You could run like substitute Gengar, substitute Hoopa, substitute Chandelure. Like all those are like valid sets on those mons, and they can put in a lot of work. They also have fighting coverage too that can deal with that stuff. And most notably, I think the main thing with Ghosts is their ability to Will-O-Wisp stuff. So that is also pretty scary to go up against. And I'd say it's a mix between offensive and defensive utility, but I think Will-O-Wisp is a really solid deterrent for dark types that want to come in and try to revenge kill you. So I think that's really solid for Ghost. Um, yeah, so that's my tier picks for S tier. Next up, I have my A tier. So starting off of here, this is supposed to be ground. And honestly, my reasoning is like the exact same for Sarah. It is a very spammable type, and Earthquake is just so good. It is literally like no drawback. A 100 base power move and no drawback is insane. Um, and you also have a notable immunity to electric, which is very nice. Only drawback is the flying immunity, but at the same time, like Sarah said, most of those mons are usually weak to rocks. So that is one positive going forward as well. Um, I'm trying to think of other offensive ground type moves, but I think Sarah covered most of them with the Earthquake and Earth Power too a little bit. So moving on to the next one, Fairy. So similar reasoning for Sarah. For Sarah, Fairy is kind of hard to switch into, and most of the fairies have like coverage options for would-be switch-ins. So a perfect example I think is like Gardevoir. Gardevoir has steel coverage. It also has psychic coverage too. So you can hit the steals and you can hit the poisons. And that's just one small example. I think the fact that you only have two resistances is really solid too, because you can easily cover that with like a ground type like extra drill or something, which is also really solid. Um, my main reason for it not being higher is that there's not really that much of a good like distribution. There's only like three good fairy types I can think of in ORAS, that being like Clef, Diancie, and Altaria. So it's very kind of limited, and most of the time you have to spend a mega slot, which is kind of unfortunate. Um, but yeah, moving on to the next one, I put Psychic here. So I think most of my influence for this is like going back to like Psychic type in Gen 1, side spam. There's entire strategies around like just loading up on psychics and just pounding through the opponent's team. I think that was a thing in Black and White too, where like people use Latios and Alakazam. I think psychic is a really solid typing in ORAS too. I think the main thing going for psychics is their diversity in offense. So you may think of stuff like Zam and Medicham initially, but also defensively, psychic types can sweep through your team as well. I think Reuniclus is a very underrated example where it's bulky, but it can also sweep through your team too. I think it's an excellent like stall breaker, um, and it's really great in the sense that a lot of times psychics have options to deal with stuff that would resist it anyways. So psychics usually have like fairy or fighting coverage to hit darks. They usually have a ghost coverage to hit other psychics, which is really nice too. And they I think the only thing holding them back is like the steals. So the psychics in this gen don't really have sacred fire, or not sacred fire, mystical fire, I think, to hit steals. So I think that's like the one drawback. But they do still have focus blast, which is kind of iffy at best. But I think it's a really solid type that shouldn't be slept on. Um, I think it's the scariest. I think it's scary too because it has kind of really solid setup options that it has to take advantage of its diversity. So Calm Mind is very solid. I think some of them also have Nasty Plot too, which is really solid. So you can like compound this so much, and then you oftentimes have recovery, and then you have stuff like Psyshock to hit mixed. So it is really diverse type where you can really hit whatever you want to. Kind of depends on the coverage, and it's pretty easy to support as well. Um, all right, so moving on, next one, I have fighting. So I know Sarah had fighting a little bit lower, and I might also put it a little bit lower as well. I think the main thing I had going for fighting was the high base power moves that have like really solid accuracy in my opinion. But besides like focus blast, of course, I'm talking about stuff like high jump kick and close combat, where they can hit like really hard. And I wouldn't say I wouldn't say CC is spammable, but I think high jump kick is pretty spammable, especially if you're a Medicham user or Lopunny user, which is like honestly, I think is one of the most satisfying moves to hit in the game. I also think fighting types have a lot of really interesting utility offensive wise. So I think access to SD is one big one where you can, boost your attack, like basically double your attack, and then you can hit even harder than you would originally. And then you also have access to stuff like Drain Punch, so you can hit extremely hard and then gain HP back, which is really cool. You also have like most of these mons have dark coverage and rock coverage at the same time, so you can hit stuff like psychics and uh, you know, flying types too pretty effectively. I do think that the scariest thing to, watch out for with the fighting coverage at least is bulk up. And if a mon runs bulk up, you better run for the hills because it's gonna put in a lot of work. And I think the main users of that ironically aren't fighting types. I think Talonflame is one big one I can think of, but maybe I'm blanking on something. But I think the fact that there's a lot of different utility options you have offensively to set up with fighting types, and the fact that it's resisted by very few types to begin with is why I think it's A. I think the fact that it's resistant by fairy, like Sarah said, is why I don't have it much higher. And I think, yeah, it's not as spammable as some of the other types that I mentioned before. All right, so that's fighting. Next up is water, which I think, in my opinion, is like the best type. So I think it's a very solid defensive type, and I also think it is very solid offensively. Uh, Let me just get this out of the way. So I think Scald is one of the reasons why it is a ridiculous type to deal with. Scald, as we mentioned before in our videos, feel free to check them out, really spammable, hits basically everything. Even if you're a resist, you still risk getting burnt, which is very annoying to deal with. Not to mention, water has some of the highest base power moves with little to no drawback whatsoever. Surf is one of them. I think Hydro is like one of the most accurate moves of like Fire Blast and Thunder and stuff like that. Uh, and then there's also like the Surf, Hydro, Scald. Yeah, it was basically a lot of powerful stabs you can spam, and like it's resisted by very few things, and it's kind of funny. Like when you look at what mons resist water, and you can think of, you know, when people think of water, they usually think that the water type usually has ice coverage or something to hit the resist anyways. Like dragon and grass love to switch into water, but they fail to switch into ice beam, which most water types can probably run. So that's one unique thing about water, where like there's kind of pseudo ice types at the same time offensively, which is really nice. Um, and then most water types usually have some sort of utility options to hit its counters as well. Scald plus Toxic, as we mentioned multiple times in our previous video, is very hard to switch into. Um, and yeah, the only reason why I wouldn't put it up higher is because there still are like solid resist, and I think most of the water types you think of like are pretty bulky in nature, so they really don't get it going besides like Keldeo, or like Crawdon on Trick Room or something like that. But yeah, I think it's just like I'd say it's an excellent type defensively, and we'll put out another video about that coming soon. But I think the only thing holding it back offensively is just the lack of like abuser. There's no like Greninja is banned here, of course. So the only main offensive waters you would think of in this tier are like Keldeo and Starmie maybe and Crawdon. But other than that, most of them are like defensive in nature with some utility like Calm Mind and stuff. But we'll get into that in the defensive one. But that's why I have it in A and not any higher up. Um, I think Sarah and I both have electric in B. Same reasons, kind of held back by its ground type, and like Volt Switch I think is really nice. Uh, but yeah, it's really held back by the fact that there's not really good coverage options. There are very few exceptions. Like I think Zapdos is one of them, where it has really nice coverage. Same thing with Mega Main. But other than that, yeah, it's kind of held back by the fact that like it kind of wants to be super effective against more types, but it unfortunately isn't. So that's what I think is holding it back. Fire, I don't have it as high up, just because I think fire is like kind of held back. Like I think Sarah mentioned it before about a different type where it's like its defense is holding back its offense. So I think the main problem I have with fire is the stealth rock weaknesses. So I think that severely limits the number of switches you can, you know, bring to get a fire type in, and oftentimes that forces a fire type into a state of passivity. My, I think an example we gave before was Talonflame. Talonflame is 4 times weak to rocks. So you know if you're trying to sweep with, actually Talon is a flying type sweeper. So let me ignore that. Let's say Zard X or Zard Y. Zard Y is trying to come in, takes rocks. You know it is a really strong special attacker, but you know it'll probably just get 1 kill and the opponent brings their like faster threat in like Mega Metagross or Weavile and stuff and it just takes you out. And if the Zard wasn't weak to rocks, then it could have probably just grabbed another kill or just outright swept the team. And that's I think one of the things holding fire back for me, just because like the weakness to rocks really holds it back. Like there's only a few limited number of switch-ins, and then there's only like Heatran that doesn't really mind that, but it's more used defensively than offensively in my opinion. So that I think that's what's holding fire back for me. Um, all right, next up, C. So C, this is one of the things where I think it's kind of flexible. I might change some stuff around, but my main reasoning for C was stuff like Sarah mentioned, like Lopunny and Diggersby. But looking back at it, you know, it's usually the mons themselves are good, not the type. Um, as Sarah mentioned before, normal doesn't have many resist. Like it has one immunity in Ghost, and then it's resisted by Rock and Steel, which is like all right. Um, I do think it's a little bit better offensively than the stuff in D rank, just because normal types have this like you know I don't know if it's like tradition or pattern, but they have like really diverse coverage options to hit other stuff. And I think one of the reasons why Clefable was really popping in this gen was before because it had you know, really diverse coverage options as a normal type previously, and then it carried over. So it had stuff like flamethrower, ice beam, knockoff, all that good stuff from when back when it was a normal type. Um, and then I also think there's a lot of underrated things about normal type too. I think return is one of the most like one of the most spammable moves where it's you know it doesn't have like any drawback whatsoever. So you hit at basically at 102 base power, and you know you don't have to worry about a miss. You don't have to worry about like confusion or anything like that, which is really cool. Um, I also think that like facade is one of the most dangerous, you know, coverage options to deal with, because it really hits everything. And most of the time it's like a fighting type using it, so you know you already know like even if you go into your fighting resist, like you're still gonna get destroyed unless you're you know switching to your ghost type. But I think the main ignore Gliscor. Let's look at Conkeldurr and Breloom. Really hard to switch into, and I think I think Sarah ran like Facade Breloom and ignored the grass coverage, and I think that was a really solid decision to make because like you really don't need the grass coverage on Breloom, and just dropping facade I mean just dropping the grass coverage for facade allowed Sarah to basically hit so many different mons just because of that. So it was able to hit Tangrowth extremely hard. It was able to hit like fire types really hard, and flying types as well. So I think it is a you know underrated, but is held back by the fact that not many mons can use it effectively. And it's usually just facade or return you're thinking of, and those mons are already good offensively as it is. Um, I think it's a little bit better than the stuff in D tier, but I might change that like Sarah said. Um, Flying, I should probably move this up. Flying type is a very scary type to go up against offensively. Tornadus, Pinsir, uh, Talonflame. Man, those those mons are very very scary. They have really nice abilities. And then flying type itself can really like I'd say like it has a like different utility defensively too with roost and stuff, but I won't go too much into that. Um, I think it's very easy to cover what flying is weak to. You just have to cover stuff like electric and rock and ice, which I think honestly, if you run like a solid fighting type, you're probably good. I think Tornadus, for example, has extremely solid coverage options to hit what it's usually weak against, which is really cool. I definitely should move this up a little bit higher because I think, yeah, I'm putting it way too low. I should not put it with the normal type, that's for sure. Um, all right, so moving on to the next one, Steel. I think Steel is actually a pretty bad type offensively. Like, I think the main thing preventing me from putting it in D tier is the fact that Sarah mentioned it's good versus Fairy, and it's also pretty nice to have a bullet punch on certain mons. And I think bullet punch is one of the reasons why I don't have it as low as it should be. But yeah, it's resisted by way too much, but like more than you think, to be honest. Um, Electric, fire, steel itself. I think I think that's it actually. Oh, electric, fire, ground, steel. Yeah. Oh no, water as well. Yeah, water resisted too. Yeah, that I mean, yeah, it's not super effective against much either. There's ice, rock. I think that's it. Ice, rock, and fairy. Yep. Yep. So not that much going for it. And then next up we have dragon. Dragon, in my opinion, dropped off a little bit in Gen 6 with the fairies and steels running around, and I think it's a very risky type to use offensively because there's so many drawbacks that could be taken advantage of. If you outrage lock, you might set yourself up to get reverse swept by the opposing team. If you Draco and get a Spadef drop, you're also putting yourself at risk for that. I'd say Dragon type is better defensively, to be honest, and we'll probably just go over that in the next video. But yeah, I think there's too many drawbacks to using Dragon, strong Dragon moves in this gen. And then usually you don't want to use stuff like Dragon Claw because I mean it doesn't hit as hard, so you're kind of stuck in a limbo where either you're using like a defensive Dragon type like Tank Chomp, or you're using like all out offense and just not caring about the consequences, or prepping extremely hard for like the consequences of being Spadef dropped or outraged confused. So that's my C tier. D tier. Uh, these are mostly types that don't put in as much work as you think. I'm definitely moving poison up. I'm so sorry. I have poison in D tier, Sarah. Please ignore that. I'll just skip over it. But yeah, just whatever Sarah said for poison type, I agree completely. Um, Bug, I think it's honestly quite unfortunate. Uh, U-turn, like I said, is like it is a pretty solid move, but the typing itself, most mons don't want to run bug coverage and run something else. Pinsir, like Sarah said, leech life isn't a thing, unfortunately, in this gen, so it's not really as good. So I mean, first impression isn't either. So there's really not many good options you're looking for in bug types besides like Scissor and Volcarona. And usually, I mean, bug buzz is kind of scary on Volk, but it hits like it, you're probably like better off running some other coverage option. Um, yeah, I can't really say much about it because like there's so many different resists. Like you have flying, steel, fire, fairy. Uh, yeah. So in my opinion, I think that's kind of unfortunate because it could be putting in a lot of work. And maybe that's one of the reasons why they made U-turn a bug type, because you can U-turn on everything, but you can't really hit hard except like if you're Scarflanders or something like that. But yeah, that's a different story. Um, all right, so last one, grass. I know it is quite ironic for me to be a grass type mon like Sceptile, grass gym leader, and think grass is a bad offensive type. Um, this is mostly because I think grass is a very solid defensive type with a plenty of utility and stuff like the stun spores and normal spore, lead seed, where you see like all that interesting stuff. But that's a different video. I think grass. I think grass has like the most number of resists in the game, if I'm not mistaken. Poison resisted, bug resisted, dragon resisted, steel resisted, flying resisted, fire resisted. I think ice also resisted, so it is resisted by so much, and it's kind of held back by that, in my opinion. And the fact that there's no good like offensive, there's very few good offensive grass types, um, in like Sceptile, Roserade, Serp, and maybe Banded Ferrothorn or Tangrowth or something like that. But usually when I think of grass types, I think of defense. So not much going for offensively. I think it's one of the best types to use in game because you always got those really juicy Giga Drains and stuff. But unfortunately here, there's like way too many resists for grass to get going, and it often is like really held back by that, which is kind of sad. I really like grass type, but yeah, you really do need like coverage options. I think the main reason why Serp is used so much just because it has contrary leaf storm boost, which is nice, but it also has a hidden power, so it can run um hidden power whatever it wants to hit, whatever it needs to hit. So you can run HP rock, you can run HP fire, whatever you decide. But yeah, that's those are my picks so far.
All right. Well, guess I'll say some thoughts about your picks, Anvil. Um, I completely forgot that like facade was a thing for normal, and I think facade's actually like pretty solid. A couple mons, as mentioned with my Breloom set. Um, well, I think I forgot to mention with poison. Also, you just reminded me.
Mhm.
Toxic. I was thinking of toxic. Like toxic is, you know, not the fastest way to kill something, but it kills like most things that aren't other poison types and steel types. So
Yeah,
that's a thing I forgot to mention. So having toxic being a poison type moved it up for me because otherwise I probably would have it in the same spot as you. Um, yeah, I think you're right that grass does have the most resistances, but um, ice is not resisted actually. Ice only resists ice. Ice is pretty bad defensively. Um, no, I don't think you were really. I think the only like thing that's really glaring uh, on your list that you also mentioned was the flying was pretty low.
hmm yeah, I'm definitely moving that higher. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean flying
yeah,
was pretty bad for a while because there really was not much that got access to attacks. I mean like Salamence in Gen 3 ran like HP flying. It wasn't until like Gen 4 where Brave Bird became like a thing, and even then, what had it like Staraptor? I can't think of anything else that was relevant that had it. So flying took a while to get going. Besides that, though, uh, yeah, I think we have some different opinions about the water. I think water is a little bit better. I can see fire being low though, like the defensive shortcoming could hold it back. Although I do think that resisting fairy and stuff and steel, like the two best types,
hmm
could give it some more utility this generation than previous gens. Uh, Yeah, no, I don't think I change anything. Oh, also focus punch. I forgot. That's the thing on fighting, which is also like pretty solid. I really do like that. Um, yeah, no, I'm happy with my list. I definitely see the argument though for having like a dark and ghost tire. Like they are very spammable. Although I think for me, I feel like it's very hard to sweep with knockoff usually, unless you're like a choice scarf, Lando or Weavile. After like the rest of the team has been you know, broken down. But even so,
Mm.
it's and I forgot Beat Up 2 existed for a sec. It's got a lot going for it. I mean, all these things have a lot going for them, you know. And part of
Yeah.
it is we're also thinking about the Pokemon that get them, the moves they have access to. So you're
Hmm.
kind of like weighing different things. I guess mentally we weigh things a little differently. But yeah, I don't think anything was like that egregious. How he said, come on again, real quick. Uh, Also, though, I can see an argument. Excuse me. I can see an argument for like rearranging a little bit of A, but I mean, it's all the same tier, so they're all roughly the same for me.
Yep,
Uh,
yep.
yeah, maybe it was a little mean to normal, but I feel like something had to be D tier, and I
Mhm.
thought everything else had a little more going for it. Like you really don't need to run normal coverage on anything, you know.
Yeah, that's true.
Like I feel like the only reason why you would run normal is because Demon happens to be good, is also a normal type. You know, it's not because like, oh man,
Mhm.
I need this normal stab,
Yeah, yeah,
or like I need this normal coverage. It's usually something else going on. Uh, yeah, I guess that's it. Anvil, anything else you want to say about my list or your list or just exercise in
yeah.
general?
I think it's really nice to look at other people's opinions too, because I already learned a lot on like your reasoning for some of these types being a little bit higher up, and I can definitely understand it at this point, like why something should be high up. And I think the biggest change for me, I think, would definitely be to shift flying up, because yeah, I slept on so many of those those bonds, especially in this gen, where they can put in so much work. Um,
Talonflame, I think,
yeah,
is all you need to say.
yeah. Yeah, for some reason I was thinking of Talonflame being like a fire type, but nah, it doesn't run fire. It's
uh,
not usually.
oh, and sometimes, yeah,
But
but yeah, it's
yeah,
really the flying we're there for.
yeah.
But fire's good too, though.
True, true.
I can't wait till we talk about the defensive one because honestly, the defensive list I think is way more interesting, or at least in
Yeah,
my
yeah.
opinion. I feel like most people, um, well, actually, no, I can't even say that because I've seen. Okay, so the inspiration, I think that we've had this idea for a while. But what compelled me to suggest this was I saw Nathan Likes Chicken. I do like Nathan Likes Chicken. So he hasn't uploaded a video in a while, I don't think. But he made like I think on Twitter, like his tier list for this, and he had like Rock at like D tier or something or like F tier. It was like the lowest type. I was like, what? How is Rock the lowest type for you? So I was so offended by that bad take that I had to make um my own tier list.
Hmm.
Like, come on, man. I just couldn't. Like, it was like I'm like speechless still, even like just thinking about it. Like people could consider like a Rock bad offensively. Like you can call Rock types bad. You can call Rock defensive typing bad. But offensively, like come on, no. I just can't do it. Stealth Rocks,
Yeah,
I just can't. All right. Um, that's about all I got.
yeah, yeah. If you guys agree or disagree, please let us know in the comments. Even you can like show us your screenshots too. We'd love to see what you guys think and some reasoning as to why. Uh, but yeah, we'll definitely do one for defensive types later. And yeah,
Yep.
we'll see you guys in the next one. Remember to ring the bronze zone, guys,
Yeah.
in the Chameco box.
Yeah. Please
The
tell us in the comments. If you agree, disagree, or if you want to make your own tiers, or just tell us. I'd love to hear your feedback. Also,
Mhm.
like the video. Like the video. Lick it.
Oh yeah.
Like the video. Okay, guys, I'm gonna stop now. We're a little overtime. All right, later.
Peace.